Tal Kadosh, Boker Or, Masechet Menahot, Daf Yomi, Daf Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, 31a1. Says the Gemara, we're talking about right now that there's going to be a machloket between Rav Papa and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Papa comes and he says that we're talking about the Shida. The Shida, right, is going to be like a chest, like a drawers, right? And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak comes and he says we're talking about yain. So now let's explain. Rav Papa comes and he says, Shida, what are we talking about? The Tanambas we learned in a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Kelim. We're talking about kli'etz, right, which are very big. So he says Hashida, which is a very, very big kli etz. Bet Shammai Omrim, Bet Shammai come and he says, now we wanted to find out, do we have Arbaim Seah in it or not? Is it going to be Mekabel tomorrow or not? So Bet Shammai says, Nimdedet mibifnim. What does that mean? When you're going to come and you're going to be moded, the nefach, the volume, and you want to measure the volume, if it has 40 seah, and therefore it's not going to be a Torat Kli anymore to do it to Kabbalah Tuma, or if it's going to be less and it is going to be Mekabel Tuma, so we're going to do the nefach on the inside, meaning we're not going to check the difanot. It's not including the difanot, meaning I need 40 se'ah on the inner volume, without the walls. Okay, without the walls. Bet Hillel Omrim, Bet Hillel says, no. Mibachutz, with the walls, meaning I'm adding the walls to the nefach, to the volume of the 40 se'ah. Umodim elu ve'elu, but both of them agree, whether it's Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel, she'en ovia raglaim, right, ve'ovia levazvazin nidad, that the raglaim, which is basically going to be the legs of the shida, or the misgeret etz, which is on top of the shida, which is like, they used to have like for decorations and all those things on the top of the shida, that's not going to be nimdadimo. Rabbi Yosef says, modim shovir ragam nimdad, it is, ubenehenim, but the in-between is not nimdad, meaning that you do add, whether it's going to be the legs, the support, or the top part, but you don't do the in-between. Rabbi Shimon Shezuri Omer, if it was going to be a tefach tall, em benehen nimdad, but if it's going to be less than a tefach, it is going to be nimdad. So therefore you have a few different machlokot. Right? One more time. Do you only take the inside, which is going to be Bet Shammai? Bet Hillel says also the walls, and then we're going to have that it's mashma, the first shita, that they're not going to nimdad. Who's this? Umodim elu ve'elu, that it's not going to be nimdad, the legs or the top part. Rabbi Yosef says that you do add the legs and the top part, right? But you don't do them between. And Shimon Shezuri says it all depends on in between or not. How much is it? Is it going to be a tefach or not a tefach? Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak comes and he says, remember, the first shita was Rav Papa. The Rav Papa was talking about the Rabbi Shimon Shezuri again, right? So now we're going to go to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak comes and he talks about yain. Titznam, as we learned in the Mishnah Tarot. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, shemen techila leolam. Right? What does that mean? The shemen, zait, that becomes tameh, is going to be always a rishon letumah. Right? Leholam, whether it was going to become tameh from an avatuma, or from a rishon tuma, or from a sheni letuma. Why? Because since the shemen is a mashke, so it's like other mashkim, the chachamim came and they made a gezerah that it always becomes a rishon. Meaning like this. Usually, the way the tuma v'tara works is you always go down a level. So you've got avi avot tuma, whatever it touches is going to become an av. The av touches is going to become a rishon. The rishon is going to become a sheni. Sheni is going to become a shlishi. Shlishi is going to become a revi'i. Right? That's the way that it works. It always goes down a level. And then there's rules that, for example, like a human being or whatever it is, dam v'kelim, he can never become after a rishon, right? But food can become, and then you have truma that becomes a shlishi, and then you have kodesh that becomes a revi'i. So there's always going to be rules. Okay? Now, part of the rules, though, is that shemen, since shemen is a mashke, so the shemen will always go back to becoming a rishon. Okay, that's what we just said. So it says one more time. Rabbi Meir Omer, shemen techila leolam. It will always become a rishon letuma, whether it became tameh through an av, rishon, sheni, doesn't matter what. It always goes back to become a rishon. Chachamim omrim, af dvash. Dvash is the same halacha because it's going to be a mashke, so therefore it becomes a rishon letuma. Says Rabbi Shimon Shezuri, af yain. He also includes wine. That since wine is also going to be a mashke, again it will always become a rishon. So on this Mishnah, Rabbi Chanina says halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Shezuri. Okay, so miklal, the Tanakama savar yain lo. So it's mashma that the Tanakama does not hold of yain, right? So that means only it was Rabbi Shimon Shezuri that sold wine, right, and not anybody else. So Eima Rabbi Shimon Shezuri Omer yain. What does that mean? When you come and you say, right, yain without the word af, because if you say af, you're including, so if you don't say the word af, he's arguing on Rabbi Meir and on Chachamim. And he's saying that this is what, but yain, everybody agrees that it is a mashke. Okay, so he says, Valkach uomer the lalacha like Rabbi Shimon shezuri. So according to this, that we just said here, because basically what we're trying to do is that when you say af hayayin also, right, what is a mashma? So it's mashma that ki'ilu, that they're saying that it's not a mashke, and he's saying that it is a mashke. So what they're arguing? So they say, no, 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 no. When you take off the word af, so it comes out that the Shimon Shizuri is coming and saying that wine by itself is a mashke, not the other ones. And therefore, according to that, so he's arguing on Rabbi Meir and Chachamim. He's not adding on to them. He's arguing. Okay, if you take off the word af. Okay? So Tanya, we learned in a Braita. Rabbi Shimon, Amar Rabbi Shimon Shizuri. It says Rabbi Shimon Shizuri. Pam achad nitarev li tevel bechulin. It once happened that I got tevel, they got mixed up with chulin. Remember, tevel is untithed produce. Produce that was untithed. That was not taken off Trumot Masrot. It's called untithed. Okay? Tithed. T-I-T-H-E. No, no, untithed. To tithe is take off Trumot Masrot. T-I-T-H. That's the tithe. Right? Trumot Masrot are called tithes. Right? So it says over here, tevel, right, is untithed produce. Okay, so he says over here that it once happened that it got mixed up with chulin, right? And it says, Ubati v'sha'alti et Rabbi Tarfon. So I came and asked Rabbi Tarfon, what am I supposed to do? V'amar so he told me, Lech kach lecha min shuk. Go come and take perot demai from the shuk. V'aser alav, and then you're going to take off the ma'aser from the perot demai on the tevel, which is mixed up. Okay, but remember, demai was when the amei come, and we don't know if they took off Tumot Masrot. So anything which belongs to an amaret is called what? Demai. So he says, Kasavar doraita beruba batel. So it's mashma the midoraita. We're going to say that it's going to be batel berov. Verov ha'me'aretz me'asrimin. And the majority of the me'aretz are going to be ma'asrin. Ve'havale, and therefore it's going to be ketore min aptur al aptur. So it's ki'ilu that you're taking off from a ptur to a ptur. Meaning, if you're going to tell me that the majority of the me'aretzot do take off maser, so therefore what you're doing then is midoraita, it's batel berov. But what you're doing now is you're taking off from the ptur to the ptur, not from the chayav for the ptur of the ptur to the chayav. You're taking on something which is the same level. Meaning, when you want to take off Trumot Masrot, we always want it to be the same level. Whether it's going to be the same level of Doraita or the same level of Rabbanan, or if it's going to be chayav al chova or ptur al ptur. We don't want it to be that you're taking off from something which is chayav to a ptur or ptur to the chayav. It just doesn't work. It has to be on the same level. So he says, so obviously this is the way to do it. So ask the Gemara, so why don't we just say lech kach min ovei just take from the goy. The goy, the perot are going to be patur min Torah and chayav min derabanan. So it's the same thing over here. It's going to be patur min Torah, chayav min derabanan. So he says, Kasavar, he holds en kinyan ovei kochavim beretz Yisrael lafkia miyad maaser. According to his shita, there's no such thing that a goy has a kinyan in Eretz Yisrael to take off from Trumot Masrot. Meaning, even if a goy owns land in Israel, it's still chayav in Trumot Masrot. Why? Because he has no kinyan in the land. He cannot do this. The Havale, and therefore it's going to be a mina chiyuv al ptur from the chova and the ptur. So therefore he didn't want to take from the goy. Right? Yeah, 100%. Ikadamri, those that say also amalei lech kach min ovei. No, he did tell him that. Kasavar, that there is a kinyan ovei kochavim beretzel v'kem yam aser. Favle min ptur ptur. So says the Gemara, I'd say the opposite. Meaning like this. One more time. We basically had the heter. He went, Rabbi Shimon Shizuri had a problem. He had a problem. What was the problem? He had tevel get mixed up with chulin. He doesn't know what to do now. The chulin is 100% chulin. The tevel, you have a problem now. You have to take off Tumat HaMasrah. How does he do it? So he gave him an answer. What was the answer to get out of it? He went and he said, go take from an Amaharetz. It's going to become Batel Berov, meaning Midoraita, it's not Chayav anymore in Truma. Now it's going to be Patur on a Patur, meaning when you're going to take off Tumat HaMasrah, you're taking off from a Patur, from an exemption to another exemption. It's okay. Ask the Gemara, why didn't you take from the Goy? And so the Gemara, according to the Shita, there's no kinyan in Eretz Yisrael for a goy. Since there's no kinyan in Eretz Yisrael for the goy, you're always chayav in Trumot Masrot. So it's going to be a chova on the ptur. It's going to be an obligation on an exemption. So says the Gemara, there was another version. Remember, ikadam means there's another version. You know what the other version was? The flip. He comes to Rabbi Tarfon, the rabbi. He starts, Rabbi, I got tevel mixed up with what's it called with chulin. He comes and he says, you know what? Buy from the goy. Oh, 1 second. That means what does he hold? He holds that there is a kinyan from the goy. That means if the goy buys a property in Eretz Yisrael, he's got a kinyan that he's able to be mafkia. He could take out of the obligation of Trumot Masrot, right? And therefore, what? It's going to be ptur on ptur. So ask the Gemara, why didn't he tell him just take from the shuk? Take perot min admai. Why didn't he tell him like the other way around? So answers the Gemara, Kasavar he holds and Rova Me'aretz Masrin. According to this Shita, meaning he holds that there is a kinyan for Goyim in Eretz Yisrael, but he holds that the majority of the Amei Aratzot do not take off Turmot U'Masrot. So if the majority of the Amei Aratzot do not take off Turmot U'Masrot, so therefore that's why it's going to be a problem, because then it's going to be a Chovah on a Ptur, and he can't do that. So Shalach le Rav Yimar bar Shlamiyah le Rav Papa had Amar that which we said Rav Chanan Yimar lo Amar Chanin alacha kim Shimon Shezuri velo od, but not only that ele kol makom shnar Shimon Shezuri alacha kim that whenever we brought on Shimon Shezuri the alacha zakim af benitarev le tevel bechulin, even in a case where it's going to be tevel that gets mixed up with chulin the alacha is like him, that you just take the perot demai and that's it, or you're going to take from the Nochri. It depends which one, because again there were two different versions of what Rav Papa told him. Amalei he says in yes alacha is like him. So Amaravashi Amarli Mizutra Kashi Be Rav Chanina Mesura. He says he had a question of Rav Yimar from Rav Chanina Mesura Pshita that it's going to be that's obvious that what the Lachazak Shimon Shuzuri even in this case. So says the Gemara Lamedala Famubet Mi Kamar b'Mishnatenu. It doesn't say in our Mishnah. It says Kol Makom Sheshana. When you say Kol Makom Sheshana, it means anywhere, even in a Mishnayot or even in Braitot. Meaning, if I come and I say Alachal Shimon Shuzuri b'Mishnatenu, it means Alachazakim in our Mishnah. When I say Bechol Makom, what does Bechol Makom mean? Bechol Makom means everywhere. Everywhere means whether it's a Mishnah or a Braita, the halacha is always going to be like him. Okay? Says the Gemara. So Lamed Aleph Amubet, 31b. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Zira, says Rav Zira in the name of Chanan el-Marav, Kara haba bishne, Kera haba bishne shitin. When you have a Kera in the Yiriot, between two lines, okay? Yitpor. So you're allowed to come and you just sew it together. Bishalosh, but if it goes into 3 shurot of the ktav, al yithpor, you have to get rid of the entire yiriyah, right? That means if you have a tear going through, if it's only 2 shurot, it's okay. If it's going to be 3 shurot, you have to put it in geniza. Amar le Rabba Zuti le Ravashi, says Rabba Zuti to Ravashi, Haki Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Difti mishme de Rava. This is what Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Difti says in the name of Rava. Had Yamrina, that which we just said, that if it's going to be 3 shurot, al yithpor, don't sew it up. Lo Amrana lo vatikta. That's only going to be if it's going to be very old, right? That it gets torn, and therefore when it gets torn, it's like disgraceful. It's meguneh. Aval chadta. But if it's going to be new clefs, let lamba. It doesn't matter. You could just sew it together. Velo atikta tita. We're not talking about mamash old. Velo chadta mamash. We're talking about new. Elahad de la fitzan had fitzan. It all depends how they did with the klafim. Meaning, many times they used to take the klaf and they used to put mei afatzim on it, and the mei afatzim. And the old ones means with afitzan, which means if they did not put they look new because they didn't put me'afatzim. So therefore, the me'afatzim, if I remember, was made in order to come and to make it easier to write. It says here it's mechazek et klaf v'shomer et tefer shelo yikara. And klaf yashan is klaf shelo bad b'me'afatzim, and therefore what's going to happen is it's very weak. So therefore it could it could it could how do you call this? It could tear easily. So basically, yeah, that's what I just read. Yeah, so basically what's happening is that he's going to come and he's going to, meaning it all depends how he processed the klaf. If he processed the klaf with this me'afatzim, so therefore he could do this, right? And there's no problem, he could sew it up, and if not, not. But how are you going to sew it? Only with gidin, right? But that was halakha Moshe Sinai. For the Sefer Torah, you have to always sew it with gidin, with the sinus, right? That's how you have to do it to the sewings, right? Aval bigradin lo, but not with gradin, which is basically chutim, right? That was, after you finish with your ariga, with your weaving, you're just going to come and use that. You need gidin. So, by Rav Yudah bar Abba, ask Rav Yudah bar Abba, ben daf le daf, or ben shita le shita mai. What happens right now if the kera came and it went between one daf and another daf? Meaning, we were talking about beforehand about how many shurot, right? But what happens if it starts at the beginning of the Bigilyon Elyon or the Tachton, and it goes through a few shurot, ben shita le shita? So what's going to be the halacha? Can you also fix it or not? Right? Because beforehand we were talking about that it just went and it went through a few shurot. Now we're talking about between the shitin, right? Between the lines. So he comes and he says, Teiku, we don't have an answer. So in such a case, which one?
This one is easy to answer. It's kosher.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Here he comes and he says, is it going to be lighter or not lighter? The reason why is because he says, to do with ben daf ledaf, the question is, do you say that it's kal yoter, that even if it's going to be three shitin, it's mutar? Or do you going to say that no, that it's going to be worse, it's chamur yoter, that even if it's nikra kolshu, it's going to be asur? That's it's unresolved because we have a doubt. We're not sure. Basically, is it going to be more chamur or more mekel? We don't have an answer. So teku. So Amar Rabbi Zeri, Amar Rabbi Chanan, Amar Rav, mezuzah sheketava shtayim shtayim. What happens if you took a mezuzah and you wrote it 2 shurot ktsarot right, on two tevot. So imagine you come and you write the mezuzah, and it's always two, like on the words, right? Two words. Keshera, it's going to be kosher. So he comes and he says, okay, fine. What about if you're going to do shtaim v'shalosh v'achat? If you do 2, 3, 1, what's halacha mahu? Amar Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak, kol sheken, that it's going to be kosher. Shasa keshira, but you made it like a shira. So Meitvei, he says, 1 second, we have a question. Asa keshira, right? Or shira, right? Ishira kimota, psula, it's going to be pasul. So he comes and he says, Kitanya he, when do we say this? He says Besefer Torah, right? To do with the Sefer Torah. Okay, that means Ktivat Daf Ragil Besefer Torah, like a Shira is going to be posel the Sefer Torah. Only in the mezuzah is it going to be kosher in such a way. Meaning in the Sefer Torah you cannot write that way. Only in mezuzah. So Itman Nami was also stated. Amar Rav Chanan Rav Yochanan Rav Chanan Amar Rav Acha Bar Chanan Rav Yochanan Mezuzah shasa 2, 3, 1 2, 3, 1 is kshira. Uvilvad shelo yaseh kekuba, but it cannot be like a kuba. Uvilvad shelo yaseh kezanav, and it cannot be like a zanav. Right now, look in the picture on the bottom. You see the kuba and you see the zanav. Right, so it's basically like a triangle upwards or downwards. By the way, you should know sometimes that happens. Right, I remember there was somebody where I was speaking to my chavruta. He's a sofer, and he told me that there was a guy that he never actually really learned sofru properly, but he was writing mezuzot, and all of a sudden he came and he put pictures on his status of mezuzot. He saw it, and right away he sent him. He told him, by the way, your mezuzah is pasul, and you're selling it right as a kosher mezuzah. It's pasul. Why? Because it went like this. Meaning, like what I told you. You remember, doctor, if a person's not professional and they don't know, they don't have a stencil exactly what to copy, so they're going to write a line, and then the second line they write, but it didn't actually finish at the end of the line, so it's a little bit off, and then the third one was a little bit off, and the bottom, so by the time it comes like this, if it comes like this, that's the zanav. If you do like a zanav, it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, it's pasul, just like it's brought down here in the Gemara, and therefore, right, and therefore there's a tmuna on the bottom of the page. The next page, cool. Right?
If it's like that,
it's pasul. That's the zanav. Or the other way around also, like this, like a kuba. Yeah, that's halacha. Yeah, 100%. So he says, Amar Rav Chasta, says Rav Chasta, right? If the two last words, right, ala aretz v'shita acharona, right? He comes and he says, if it says ala aretz, right, then we're going to do b'shita acharona. It has to be written on a line on itself. Yeah? Ika de amri. Some people say besof shita. Ika de shita has to be either at the end of the line or the beginning of the line. So man damar, according to the man damar that comes and he says besof shita. So then why? Because it says kegova shamayim al aretz. So man damar bitchilat shita because it's a hint, but it says keichad and racha shamayim, just like the distance of the shamayim va'aretz. Okay, another two dinim. Right? Amar bi chelbo chazina le Rav Huna de karichle. He used to be golel. Right, the mezuzah min echad klape shema. That's also halacha, by the way. Meaning when you come and you take your mezuzah, what you do is you roll it backwards. Right, you don't right. You don't go forwards. You go backwards. Right. אני לא אכלתי אותו. אני אומר לך את ההלכה. Yeah, בדיוק. אני אומר לך. Yeah, which means that you go backwards. Meaning when you take the mezuzah, you fold it backwards. Right, and then it says klape shema ve'olse parashiyotei satumot. It has to be satum also. So, Meitvei, we're going to ask a question that we'll ask tomorrow.